Joining me now are Elmer Kim, he's the Vice President of Growth Equity at BDC Capital, and Michael Hyatt is the Executive Chairman of Blue Cat. Welcome to both of you. Strange times. Elmer, let's start with you. What did you think when that vote came in?
Well, knuckleheads, that's what it really comes down to. 50% or just over 50% decide to put themselves into a massive recession for the next couple of years. That's a problem. Then I guess the impact in Canada right away out of the gate is, you're going to see volatility. The markets are going to be tough, but you're going to see interest rates low for a long period of time now. This is going to cause the central banks right across the globe to think about how are they going to control economic growth. This is a real problem.
Aren't you getting a sense of buyer's remorse right now?
Absolutely.
Over there? It's kind of like they're waking up and they're like, well, we didn't. There's a lot of people that voted leave, and they're like, we didn't think we'd actually leave, and they're going to find out very quickly why trade is important. Do you think that any company right now is going to add jobs to England, is going to add jobs in places in Europe? The problem is it's going to freeze everything because it's uncertainty. And the markets are coming down because there's less certainty. So everybody doesn't know what to do because we've never played this playbook before. Mm-hmm. So there's going to create a lot of consternation in the process, and there's going to be less jobs, and there's going to be less trade. And eventually it sort itself out. But there's no way England's going to boom right now. And the fault of this, there's a lot to share in the fault here. I mean, if you take a look at how there's a lot of tone deafness here. I mean, if you look at London, it votes to stay, but a lot of England voted to leave.
Right.
And there's this kind of idea that, that this ruling elite wanted to stay and they weren't listening to other people. And the same thing you're getting with Bernie Sanders, the same thing you're getting with Donald Trump. You're getting a lot of people that are this angry middle class that is voting really not to stay or leave. They're just voting because they're angry to get out.
But doesn't that say something that they feel the current economic system, this current financial system isn't benefiting them? So this is really perhaps a protest vote, perhaps one that many have already said they regret.
That's exactly what it is.
But maybe it could work out in their benefit. Maybe the whole system has to change.
No, it's not going to work out in their benefit. The great England of the 1970s, 1980s, it was like a complete depression for the last 20 of those years. A horrible period of time. And the fact that they've actually gone to the top of the world economic pinnacle is largely because of the EU. They're now going to be kicked out. It's 60 million people. They're out of the system. Canadian companies, American companies will be setting up shop in Paris and in Berlin and in Belfast and in Dublin and in Scotland when these guys ultimately decide to walk out. London's done. Mark my words, 35 years from now, London is not going to look like what it is today.
Well, let me put it to you this way, Michael. What if this opens up new opportunities for Canadian investors? You can invest and work in the UK as well as having a branch in the EU. Isn't this more opportunity?
Well, listen, I was born in England. I have a British passport, and on the top of it, it says EU. Right. So that meant I could just kind of go in, do things easily in like 27 other member countries. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen, right? But I assure you what will happen is that if I'm a bank in London, I'm going to move my office or I'm going to transfer people. You're going to see tremendous job loss in London because of what's going on. How is it going to affect Canada? Canadian companies that do business in Europe, their stocks are getting hit because we just don't know. I think they're going to freeze on hiring in Europe. There's going to be a big slowdown. I don't think they really thought this out of what's going to happen. And now what's the EU going to do? Is the EU going to try to kick them out really quickly to show them, hey, we're not going to play ball right away because we want to stop the Netherlands and Denmark and everyone else from moving out really quickly? What's going to happen? Who benefits from this? Does Russia benefit from this if the EU falls apart? Does America benefit? I mean, America is actually probably a great place to invest considering what's going on. Canadians are going to benefit in mortgage prices. Why? Because you're not going to see interest rates go up. Why? Because no one's going to tighten up any policy because we're going to have to be very accommodative all around the world. Yellen can't raise interest rates in the U.S. The EU maybe cut them again, and certainly Canada can't raise rates. So maybe we're going to see real estate prices keep climbing in places like Vancouver and Toronto.
Well, sort of on that note, I want to play a clip for you from the Governor of the Bank of England. We're talking specifically, of course, about Canadian Mark Carney. Now, he's warned that the Brexit could lead to financial instability, similar to what you folks are saying, but that's in the short term. And he says it's bad news not only for Brits, but for Canadians who have investments in the UK. Let's have a listen to what he said as the results were coming in.
To be clear, the Bank of England will not hesitate to take additional measures as required as markets adjust and as the UK economy moves forward. As a backstop and to support the functioning of markets, the Bank of England stands ready to provide more than £250 billion of additional funds through its normal market operations.
You know, Michael, you were already on this track. So what's the impact then on interest rates in the months ahead?
Oh, I don't think you can raise interest rates. I mean, I'd be surprised if the U.S. Fed raises them at all, which 92% of the time Canada follows the U.S. We're certainly not going to raise rates. We can't even do that here. I see a cut in Europe, and I think cheap money is going to be a wash for a long time. I mean, the U.S. dollar is getting too strong. It's going to hurt their exports. Our dollar came down a bit. The pound is at an all-time low right now. I mean, what I don't understand about this is that the Leave side had this idea, which was take our country back. Well, what have you taken back? How have you secured anybody's economic future now, any job? Is anybody going to get a raise in England? Is any more people going to get employed? They're going to find out very, very quickly what this means, and it's going to be quite painful for England.
The winner here actually could be Toronto in a large extent.
How?
The world needs a second large financial market that's English-speaking, that's outside of New York. London is going to, like literally, London in my mind, as a financial insurance center will melt down over the next 35 years. London was going to be the fintech center of the world. Toronto has a chance to grab that mantle. Toronto is close enough to New York, but not New York. I think we really have a chance, and I think Canada should take the leadership here. But mark my word, this is the worst decision the UK has done in a long period of time. This is why referendums are bad.
Yeah, clearly. But, you know, let's not blame the people who voted for this. Let's also blame the politicians that have a deaf ear to this massive. I mean, what do you call people that make kind of between $40,000 and $100,000 a year that are struggling? We don't call them lower income class. They're just this middle class that is just floating out there, just angry. We know that 13% of all America, for example, never recovered from the last housing crisis. There's this anger pooling or something.
Right.
And then these people jump into the political arena and say, let's take our country, let's make America great again. Let's take our country back. Well, what have you really done? Closing borders and closing trade. I mean, this is the rhetoric of some politicians in the U.S. as well. It doesn't. We need more trade. We need more open borders. We actually need more immigration. We need more babies. We need more young people in countries. And that's the problem here. And now we're going to have a stark less trade. I mean, 50% of all England's trade is with the EU. So what happens now? They have no trade agreements with anybody. They have to renegotiate every trade agreement.
But they've got 2 years to set up
They're gone. They're gone. They're
It's
out.
over?
Yeah, it's like a divorce. It's like a bad divorce. They have to get out like right now, quick, because they're going to have a second referendum. Scotland's gone. Northern Ireland's going to be gone. But EU wants them out. Paris is a potential big winner in this. Germany's a big winner in this whole mix. So they're gone.
But the thing is, and we know, we've heard from the EU ministers, they want them out as quickly as possible. But that's the thing, it's not a clear-cut divorce. It's a divorce, and you still have to have a daily relationship with this bloc that is now of 27 states.
The UK thinks they're much more important than they actually are. 60 million people for all, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. It's not that important. Slovenia is much more important. Czechoslovakia is much more. Turkey is much more important. Ukraine is much more important. So the whole power of the access power of the economics in Europe is moving towards the east. And I think, London's left himself behind.
I mean, I recall, maybe this is a bad example, but I recall back in the 60s or a long, long time ago that Montreal was going to be the powerhouse of Canada for the financial markets. I mean, you remember Montreal was supposed to be the thing. What was in Montreal? All the banks. What did Quebec do? Sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. They all left. They essentially backed out on trade. They said, hey, we might leave. Created instability, created insecurity. Who became the king of financial in Canada? Toronto. Toronto was given that throne. It was really supposed to be Montreal. Same thing might happen here with Britain.
So let me jump in here, bring it back to Canadian investors who might have investments in the UK. What does this mean for them? What are you recommending?
Well, if they're in the UK right now, they're in pound sterling. That's going to take a pounding for the next 6 months until this gets sorted out. There's complete uncertainty. There's going to be money flowing, and that pound's going to continue to decline for the next 6 to 12 months. So that's a big problem.
So when the markets were down on Friday significantly, I started to buy. I buy when there's blood in the street. Even if the blood's mine, and that's how the saying goes. And so I started buying large companies that were down, I think, a little unreasonably, that had very big cash flows and that are international, that are taking a big hit. I started to buy companies like, I added to my positions at Magna and IBM and big companies that I think that are going to be just fine. Some of the bank stocks I think were overdone. I think the oil stocks were overdone. I think they'll come out of this. I think it's going to be very hard for companies, though, that have a huge amount of their revenue in Europe because there's instability. This all comes down to one word: confidence. Markets react on confidence.
Unfortunately, guys, I have to leave it there, but I'm pretty sure we're going to keep talking about this in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you so much. That's Elmer and Michael, our weekend business panel.